break it all the way down to just taking one step, making one good decision. I feel like right now everything's collapsing all around you. You're not going to solve everything with one decision. Just make one good decision and then stack those and keep stacking them.
There are times where we need someone to speak words to us and to like be able to grab you by the shoulders and say, what are you doing? Or give you a hug and say you're doing great, right? And so someone who can both succeed and can do it. And because I know for myself, I am really good at rationalizing any decision that I make. And it can be very difficult to get out of your own head. And so for me, the value of having a mentor and being a mentor for someone else is having somebody that understands me, understands the context around me.
All right, so welcome everyone to episode 3 of the Valley to Victory podcast. And we have Levi here and Chris, great to have you on. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, fantastic to have
here.
you guys on. And let's just kick off with a few words about you, because people might know you, people might not, but let's just get cracking with just telling a bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do, and let's just start with Levi, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I'm a Christadelphian here in Southern California. I think, well, Chris and I's story is a lot of our bio is kind of the same. We're both Christadelphians, both here in Southern California. We're actually only a couple months apart in age. We grew up together, kind of childhood friends, and we both have beautiful families. We both have young families. Chris has 3 boys. I've got 2 girls, and we attend different ecclesias. I go to Simi Hills. Chris goes to Verdugo Hills. I guess I should let you talk somewhat for yourself, Chris, but I sell insurance for a living. And why don't you take over, Chris?
Yeah. So Levi did the backstory. Yeah, we've been friends since we were kids. We grew up together. I grew up down in Orange County, and then moved up to Simi Valley when I got married to my wife Kristen. And like I said, 3 boys, 11, 10, and 8. And yeah, I attend Verdugo Hills, which for some of the international people is the same ecclesia that Bob Lloyd attended for many, many years. I still remember having to, other young people would try to dodge him. I would deliberately try to catch him and shake his hand, because he always liked to give a hard time to young people that tried to avoid the old people. So I would go up and say hi to him. So yeah.
That's really cool. I think I've heard a few stories about that as well. Thanks so much. And I think let's continue with just going back to your beginning. Like, you weren't always Christadelphians. What's your story of faith? Where did it start for you? And maybe we can start with Chris, if that's okay.
Yeah. So my grandparents on my mother's side were Christadelphian when I grew up. My grandfather actually came into the truth after meeting a brother who was on the track team with him in Southern California. And then he met my grandmother, who's out on the East Coast. Growing up myself, my mom was always Christadelphian, but my dad never was. So fairly early on in my life, I kind of had to make the decision of whether or not I was going to kind of hang out with my dad and go his way, or hang out with my mom and the rest of the family. And so, yeah, it kind of forced me to have to make a decision on which direction I was going to go in my life. And so people like Levi and some of the other people that I grew up with really helped make the truth be just it started as just a social thing for me, where it's like my friends are up in Simi Valley, so I want to go up there all the time. I want to go to CYC all the time. And then as I got a little bit older, right, then you start to realize that you start to make the faith that you grew up in your own, and start to kind of have your, kind of conversion moment where you realize it. And it was actually Levi getting baptized at 13 that made me start to actually think about it seriously. Now, it took me 3 more years to figure that out, but I remember when he was the first of my friends to get baptized, and I remember at 13 being like, oh, I actually need to start like thinking about this real. I'm not just showing up to hang out with my friends. I need to start thinking about it. So yeah, so that was kind of mine, but that'll kind of segue over to Levi for his side.
Yeah, I grew up a Christadelphian. I was a Christadelphian of Christadelphians, I would say. And that's, I'm quoting Paul there as a Pharisee of Pharisees. I was a 5th generation Christadelphian on both sides of my family. So it was very much part of my culture and my upbringing. And it was actually, I guess, Bob Lloyd, I should credit, because he would often talk at Bible schools and at camps and stuff that he was baptized when he was 10 years old. So that kind of model for me was like, well, I think 12 or 13 is late enough. I had a real cold logic to it. I thought, well, I'll get baptized now because I believe it and I think it's the right thing to do. And if I change my mind later, then this baptism doesn't matter anyways. So I don't see a point. I didn't feel any sort of extra responsibility or any fear about that commitment. So made that choice. But I think like baptism and conversion are different things. I don't believe I was converted till much later. I think I might have had a faith when I was that, young age, and, then I could take on responsibilities that I think I might even pridefully wanted, like speaking or things like that. And then I think my conversion happened, in my early 20s, like maybe before I got married. And later, my wife and I did some missionary work, and I think in India. And I think that really was kind of when I really decided to kind of take this on as my life, and have kind of been now in that struggle ever since on, the questioning your actions and making sure that they're genuine actions of your faith, of a converted heart, and not just doing what you were told, to impress the people around you, which I think is how, if I'm honest, how I was kind of raised. So that I would say is my kind of conversion story. Obviously still happening. We still make mistakes. We still try to get better every day.
Cool. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing that. That's very valuable information and a good backstory for people to understand where you come from, what you're doing. And I think let's segue into what you're doing right now. Maybe we can talk a bit about Good Christadelphian Talks, like how you involved in the meeting at the moment, and what is it you do to support the work for the Lord.
We both serve on a lot of different committees. I'll let Chris explain that. For him, I serve on the Onesimus Committee, which is a youth camp on the East Coast of the United States every summer. I also help out with WCF, working on some of their fundraising efforts and their national mission trips. And then I don't currently serve as an AB at our meeting or any of the local committees or the Bible school like Chris does. But yeah, Good Christadelphian Talks is something that came to us in 2018. We told the story a bunch of times on the podcast, actually. So if you are a listener, if you want to go to any of the 100th episode anniversary episodes, we usually kind of retell the same story. But we were at a men's camping weekend in 2018, spring of 2018, and kind of just in a circle, chatting with us and some other brothers. We don't have neither Chris or I have a genuine hold on who had the initial idea. I think it was really just a group iterated idea of, basically the concept is if someone ever emailed you a talk, because we've had lots of great libraries for 15 years or so online where you can find Christadelphian talks, but it's hard to know where to start, and rarely do we start. We're just kind of lazy and human. But I was saying that if anyone ever emailed me a talk, directly messaged me a single talk, I was always going to listen to it 100% of the times. If we could somehow, and I'd been a podcast listener kind of in general for a couple of years at that point. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And it started, well, maybe we can come back to kind of how the podcast has gone on for 6 years, but that's where it started. And now it's, definitely just one of our responsibilities, but I'm always impressed. Well, I think Chris does more work than me on it too, but I'm always impressed at how little of an effort it is compared to the results of it. I think it's really clearly a blessed project that we're involved in, and I'm very thankful for that kind of service opportunity. I left a lot of directions for you to go, Chris.
No, it's all right. I'll start with Good Christadelphian Talk since you spoke about it, and then I can wrap up with the stuff I'm doing on my own. So yeah, Good Christadelphian Talks very much, like Levi said, started as sort of for me personally, we had the conversation. It was actually at the men's weekend, which right now when we're recording this, we're about 2 weeks away from having the men's camp out again. So it'll be fun. And actually, one of the other hosts that's on Good Christadelphian Talk, Brian Adams, is going to be teaching there. So it'll be the first time that all 4 of the Good Christadelphian Talks hosts will be in person together. So that's going to be really fun. We might have some fun Easter eggs we try to sneak into future episodes because we're all going to be there together. I haven't quite figured out what we're going to do. I have some ideas scribbled down, but that'll be something for people that listen to the podcast to pay attention to and see if they catch any special things done that come from that location. But yeah, we were all sitting around the campfire talking about it, like Levi was saying, and it became one of those things. And then again, I give credit to Levi because we talked about it, and then within a couple of weeks of it, he was like, "Hey, I just went on Fiverr and had somebody make a logo." And I remember him just sending it to us. I'm like, "Well, if we got a logo, then we got to do something about it. We've done a thing. I think we spent $5. I'm like, but we spent $5. We got to make something happen." So then I sat and, we figured out how we were going to do it. And we brainstormed around his kitchen table, figuring out how we were going to edit it together and make an intro and do all this type of stuff. So if you go and listen to some of the earlier episodes, you can sometimes hear his birds squawking in the background of some of the early intros because they would like to speak when we were speaking because they thought we were talking to them. So, and then, my background is in tech and in IT. So it also became a little bit of a puzzle to me of figuring out what's the best way to do this and, what stuff do we need to do. It's way easier now with stuff like like Riverside and things that we're doing, right? That makes it way easier to do this than, even 5 or 6 years ago when we did it. But it's been super cool. And as Levi mentioned, it's been amazing to see how it's been blessed, because God's hand is 100% behind it. Timing wise, right? We had been doing it for about a year before COVID happened, and we were able to start putting extra exhortations. That was a tongue twister, to try to get those out so that people that couldn't meet in person would have some way to still be fed. So that I think was definitely providential in the way that we had sort of established this, because a lot of ecclesias didn't have the technology or the skill set to do a live stream. Only a handful probably did, right? So I know we've heard from lots of people that was their memorial service for several weeks or months, because they didn't have a local ecclesia they could join, and that was kind of how they were able to still get something as well. Outside of Good Christadelphian Talks, I serve on the arranging board for Verdugo Hills. Up until recently, I was superintendent for the Sunday school. Now I'm assistant recording brother, so that's fun. And then I also serve on the committee for the Atwood Bible School as well. Actually, fun story, I'm a third generation secretary for the Atwood, because my grandfather was secretary for the Atwood committee, and I've recently, in the last couple months, got all of the old files from the previous secretary, and it was amazing finding notes handwritten by my grandfather, who is
Oh wow,
91.
that's cool. That's really cool.
And at the bottom of it all, it's signed with his signature, and I recognized his handwriting right away. So it's been fun going through and seeing his handwritten notes that he converted into minutes to send out, and now I'm doing the same thing, slightly with a different twist. Whoever takes over from me will not see any of my handwriting, because it's all going to be digital. But and then beyond that, the only other one, which we've mentioned on some of the podcast, is I've been taking on and figuring out how to digitize cassette tapes. So, which kind of segues off of the Good Christadelphian Talks effort, right? Some of the talks we've shared have been cassette tapes that I got from somebody's personal library. And this one also is kind of similar to the podcast story of, we kind of got an idea, and then it was a puzzle that my brain would let go of. In this case, a dear sister at Verdugo Hills handed me a stack of 4 tapes by Brother Alfred Norris and said, "Chris, this is my recommendation for the podcast. I don't know how you get these off these tapes to put them on the podcast, but I'm sure you can figure it out." And she was the one who kicked me down this rabbit hole that now leads to me having literally thousands of tapes stored at the Verdugo Hills Hall for me to go through, because I recently got the entire WCF tape library to get that all digitized, as well as the collections from ecclesias all around Southern California. At some point, I also am going to figure out how to tackle reel-to-reel, which is going to be a whole nother fun challenge. But for the moment, I'm sticking with cassette tapes, because I can do that one. I've gotten it set up to where I can do 6 tapes at a time.
That's crazy.
So at this point, I think I've done close to 500 tapes over the last couple of years. And so yeah, see, that's all the stuff I'm doing.
So interesting. I think like just hearing the word cassette tapes, for some of the people maybe listening and tuning in, they'd be like, what even is that? For you, it's there were cassettes, and then there were CDs, and then there were the iPods, and now we have our phones. So basically a journey where music has gone on this journey over just a few decades, and crazy that we can't even like easily get to that kind of media anytime anymore. Yeah, Levi, you go.
I think there's a funny that's another reason that we kind of felt a need to start Good Christadelphian Talks. Is one thing that our community does really well is give lectures and save them, and store them. And I think it was obviously there was almost a need for how do we better share this amazing heritage of our community, with all these talks that we've given. I think actually I would say like a fair criticism of the Christadelphian community as a whole is we're too focused on Bible study and lectures. Like I think anyone would kind of like have to agree, like, yeah, you're probably right. But that being said, that we still have a lot, we have a ton of these lectures and these great studies, and I think a heritage and a community around that. Like I think there's an advantage, there's a belongingness that's kind of shared when we share an old talk from Dennis Gillette or Bob Lloyd, as we talked about, or some of these, Harry Tennant, some of these old names that we've had. So I think there's a real kind of value to that. So I've been thankful that Chris, I say we, but I take the credit and Chris does the work in the case of saving those tapes. I think it's been a neat thing for us to kind of naturally lean into, as just kind of being we'll take your tapes, like might as well. Like our podcast gets a lot of has a large audience, and these are a useful asset for us. And it also just makes sense for us to be saving them somewhere, to have some sort of place where we can gather all these great studies that have been done, and kind of remembrances of different communities and different times in our community.
Yeah, I think that, as you say, it's such a powerful message to convey words, in this case, in a spoken form, and it's a strength. Why not draw on these strengths? I think if it's possible, I'd like to go a bit deeper into your lives, what you've gone through. This podcast is called the Valleys to Victory. So we're talking about the valleys in your life. Are there specific moments, maybe a specific memory that you've been through where you felt like God was testing you and you felt really low? And maybe you can share one of these struggles with people who are watching. And maybe let's start with Chris this time.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of the best one to share. I think the most, well, I won't share the most recent one that I had, because actually if you want to hear that particular one about how I had a power outage in the middle of recording a special episode for the podcast, you can listen. I think it was episode 300. I literally talk about it there,
Okay, cool.
and talk a little bit. So we can talk about that one. But the one I'll talk about is more, because this is one of those bigger ones that I think in a vacuum seems insanely crazy. So right around the same time we were starting the podcast, a little bit after that, my wife and I, we were in the process of building a house, in the process of moving. And to do that, we had to sell our house. Actually, the house we sold was actually down the street from Levi. So that was the only bummer from Levi and Jess. We're a little further away from them now than we used to be. But to do it, we had to sell our house and temporarily move in with our in-laws while we finished building the house. And about halfway through, our entire permit got revoked and put on pause because of a complaint from a neighbor. And there was a month period where we didn't know if we were going to be able to finish. The house was literally delivered because it was a manufactured home that we built, but it was in two pieces, sitting on stilts on a partially finished foundation, and no one could touch it. And all of our money was invested into that. And at the time, we were actually literally in the room that I'm sitting in right now. I'm actually at my in-laws' house right now. Our mattress was sitting on the floor of this room, and my wife and I were sitting about 2 feet from where I'm sitting right now. We were both, like, she was crying, I was close to tears, where we both were wondering if we had just ruined our lives, like financially just messed ourselves up. And it was, for both of us, it was an insane reminder of just how little control we sometimes have, and to just fully lean into that we needed to rely on God. It was one of the few times in my life that I can remember feeling 100% completely powerless and not even knowing what to do, because we were working with somebody who helped with the permitting process, and we had gotten off the phone with them, and they had said, I'm not entirely sure how we move forward. Like the person who's supposed to be the expert on this was saying he was stumped.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just prayer, and we were just like, whatever it is, we just have to have faith that it's for the better, that God has it planned. And thankfully, after a month, they were able to sort out the issue. It was about property lines and all sorts of craziness that is not worth retelling. But they were able to sort that out, and it was the longest month, I think, in my life ever. And then we were able to move forward, and we were able to finish it. And we moved in. This is another one of those kind of providential things. We moved in January of 2020. So we moved in just before COVID all went down, and we're able to have a house, our backyard is literally a mountainside overlooking the Simi Hills Hall. Actually, we're probably the closest Christadelphians to the Simi Hills Hall, and ironically, we don't attend there. We attend Verdugo Hills, but like our boys love it. Like we were able to go for hikes. So it was, in the end, it was an amazing blessing. But that was, I feel like, it's kind of the definition of a dip in the valley before you come out on the other side, because it was probably one of the lowest points that I felt, in terms of just like I felt completely at a loss. So that's kind of.
So I think to touch on this, the experience I've had so far is that God often wants us to go through all these phases of, we want to look for human solutions. And there's a point where he's like, okay, well, now all these human solutions are used up. And then he's like, well, your only other option is to trust me. And God then provides an amazing way out. But I catch myself so often going through all these, I've got plan A, plan B, plan C, and often God is plan Z. But it really should be number A, because it's always the right way. And looking back, you can always see, that's exactly how it should have happened. But when you're in those times, it's really, really hard. And So thank you so much for sharing. Maybe while we're still with you, is there anything that any scripture, any person in the Bible who like inspired you to keep going in that valley to get out?
I will admit that I'm really bad at memorizing scripture, so I will not have one at my fingertips. But yes, there were plenty that I pulled up at the time. We did lots of reading and praying. I will also say, part of it is before we started this, my wife and I have a saying that's taken from Gideon of putting out the fleece. Right, you pray for something very specific to be able to act with the confidence that that God's working in your life. And that was one of the things that I think made that valley hard, is because we had prayed about it, and we had set a budget for how much we could afford to spend. And on the last day, we had basically said, like, we're going to look for 6 months or 3 months. I forget how long we had said originally, but we had said we were going to look, and we kept looking and could not find anything. And on the last day of what we had said, the land that we got was put available for us to get. Right. So that was one of those things where we thought we had, like, in that valley, right? We prayed, we kind of put out the fleece and said, give us guidance. And we thought we saw the answer was this. So we went for it. And then in the darkest moments, we're like, did we mess up? Right? Did we forget? And so as far as what we kind of looked for from inspiration, like, I mean, I definitely looked at Gideon, because it was one of those where you ask, you think you get the answer. And I felt like Gideon, especially at that valley moment, where I was like, okay, what's another thing I can ask for to specifically remind me that I already took the first action and believed that God was saying this is the way to go. But God, can you just, like, be sure? Can you, like, just double check? Can you reconfirm it? So that was one where it was hard. It's like, well, like, we prayed about it, and, our prayer was that we would get an answer quickly on the whole thing. And when we did get the answer in the month, the same permitting guy that said at the start of the month he didn't have a clue how we were going to get through it, he said, I've never seen this get sorted out that fast. So it was one of those where we're like, okay. So it was a reconfirmation that, we were on the right path. It was just that it was a rough 30 days to get out to the other side. And maybe part of the lesson was, my wife and I both like to plan and to organize and think that we can figure things out. Like, I'm a tech guy who always likes to find the logical solution for things. So for both of us, it was like, kind of like you were saying, our first step should be to look to God for trust and guidance, not like when all other options fail that we finally turn to him. Right. And so it is still something that I struggle with. I am still very much the guy who likes to try to fix things and figure things out. But
same.
I hopefully instead of God being Zed, hopefully he's somewhere up in the LMNOP section now in my choices. So yeah.
That's a great quote. I think I'll just have to remember that one. Put God in the LMNOP section. Yeah,
I'm just
fantastic. I think that is.
I'm sorry. I said I'm just proud of Chris saying Zed. I mean, that was him speaking a different language right there, because it's clearly the letter Z. Okay.
That's good. So cool. Yes, thanks so much. I think thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that. It's very powerful to hear this, and it's amazing how God works in ways that we just cannot understand and fathom in the moment, but in retrospective we always see his work play out perfectly. So Levi, do you want to share one of those moments with us? I mean, you're welcome to also then go on to getting out of there.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, like, I've had a bunch of, I would say, like, valleys in my life. I think the pandemic was definitely one for me as a very kind of social person. Also, my wife and I had when we were moving, so my wife's from New Jersey, which is on the east coast of the United States, right outside of New York City, and we moved back to California in 2010. We had a horrific car accident, and we were totally safe from that, which was that's kind of an amazing story where we had to kind of question, what's the purpose of our life. That was before our trip to India, so we went to India, and then all sorts of kind of dramas and explorations there that we had. But today I'm thinking about just, kind of that, because I mentioned earlier my conversion coming later, and I think in the summer of 2011, which that's a long time ago. I guess I'm an old person, but in the summer of 2011, so we came back from India, and basically I was 24 and married, and we'd bought a house, and I had the job that I have now, which I knew I would have for a long time. It's been 15 years, and I think I plan on continuing the same career for a long time. So I had kind of my career, my house, my wife, my education, everything was done. Basically, I'd been on the conveyor belt of kind of accomplishment. I mean, I mentioned earlier I was baptized at 13. All these things were where basically I'd accomplished the checklist by 24, and I had kind of an actual, really my only in my life depressive episode where I couldn't like leave my bed for a day or two, which I don't think is a very real valley. And I think it's because I didn't know, I knew very clearly I didn't want children yet, but that was kind of the next level. Like that's the next thing on the checklist. And then I was like, oh, what am I, like, what's this all for now? It's like I had accomplished everything, right? And yeah, I think I still, that's honestly still something that that enters back into my head. Like if I am an incredibly blessed person, and it's easy for me to look around and find like human pride in like the things I've accomplished, right? And that's what I kind of actually so my last exhortation was about. So it's obviously present on my mind, but like that the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians are actual characteristics. They're not a collection of fruits. Like it's not like the person who bears the most fruit wins. You can't score the most points. It's totally erroneous and wrong to kind of look at your life and think, oh, man, what all have I done? It's like I guess the rich young ruler, that personality who says, yes, I've given to the poor, I've done, I can show you my resume, but if your attitudes are wrong, you're not doing this from a place of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. It's like, then it's not, then that's not what God's looking for. Like he doesn't actually want, hundreds of sacrifices. He wants our hearts. And I think that's a lesson I think I've been learning over and over for the last 15 years, especially, but I think especially since that breakdown of like it really is impossible to please God by living under a law, right? So that I would say is kind of my valley that I am always going in and out of.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. I think that's a powerful lesson as well, and you've been there and sharing that with us is exactly what we need here. And I think it's very real that men especially can go through depression, can go through hard times as well. Often the society tells us to block that away, just say men have to be hard, they have to be tough, they have to be the heroes of our society in general. And just hearing that and just hearing that, hey, it's okay, and God is with you through those hard times, and he's also with you in the good times. That's what makes this so powerful and so great, the common hope that we then also share. I just wanted to touch on a thing that I think is very prevalent in America more than it is in Germany or the UK. Do you have like a mentor, like a person that you grew up with, maybe a Christian mentor who helped you on your journey? Should we start with Levi this time?
Oh man, you accidentally touched on a very touchy subject for me. So I have had many mentors. I also think, a theme of my life has been the failure of my mentors. So I've had lots of different people that I've kind of attached to as my heroes, maybe, or people that I've tried to emulate. But again, kind of teaching that, I think the lesson that God has taught me over and over is that it is not the correct path to look for people to be your approval source, right? Because I think that's what I was doing, is I was attaching. I've been attaching to mentors, good people. I mean, in some cases, good people. Like I would say, one of my greatest mentors was my grandfather, Brother Ken, who he passed away last year, and I've prayed like that was some sort of failure of his, like just the reality of death, is something that failed me, and I still felt that I needed that mentorship, right, and that kind of approval source, right, and I think. That's been, yeah. So, and I could go on for a while. I have other stories like that so yes, like I've had mentors, but I think and maybe I'd like to hear more about what you're saying about there being a cultural difference, but I think it's now I'm at a place where I'm kind of leaning into not really attaching myself as I have to these mentors, right? I think there's people that I can look towards and that are good examples. Like I could start listing people now that are examples to me, but not people that I share with on a level of how I would define mentorship, because at this point I'm just kind of burned by them. I want to hear more, Chris. What are you kind of driving at with there being a cultural difference?
I know that at the end of the day, our mentor is Christ, and I feel like it's important that we follow through with that he's our savior, and we try to imitate him every day. But I've heard from a few Americans that they just have a friend, someone they call up who is their spiritual role model, who helps them along the way and who they have a good relationship with. And I think that's a powerful way, especially maybe at a younger age when you're going through your teens, your mid-20s, where there's more questions than answers, or at least it seems like that then these people can really help you guide and help you along your way to the kingdom.
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting, Chris, hearing the cultural difference, because I will say it's something that I think is even new-ish in America. At least I don't remember hearing about it when I was younger, in terms of like this specific thing of like find a mentor. Like it's kind of become something that I think has definitely been more recent. And I mean, part of it is I've taught CYC classes, calling on the CYC to specifically find someone to mentor and to be a mentee. And I feel really strongly that you, especially now that as Levi said, as we're becoming the old people in our community, that it is important to be mentored and to be mentoring. And the reason for that is, while I totally agree with you, right? Like our ultimate guiding light is following the example of Christ, and he is the direction that we need to emulate. It is also an impossible goal for us to reach this side of the kingdom. And I know for myself personally, and I'm sure there are other people that may have experienced something similar, is when you're trying to aim for a perfect goal, you can set yourself up for that discouragement when you miss the mark, because you're never going to take a look and say, well, I got 90%, and I don't think most of us ever get to 90%. Let's be very blunt and honest, right? But like, I got to 90%. Instead, you're saying I missed 10%, rather than acknowledging that you got to 90%. And while Christ can provide direction, right, in our lives, and put trials and things in our lives, and put in events to help us to shape, there are times where we need someone to speak words to us and to like be able to grab you by the shoulders and say, what are you doing? Or give you a hug and say, you're doing great, right? And so someone who can both succeed and can do it. And because I know for myself, I am really good at rationalizing any decision that I make. And it can be very difficult to get out of your own head. And so for me, the value of having a mentor and being a mentor for someone else is having somebody that understands me, understands the context around me. So when I come to Levi or another brother, or even a sister or an aunt or somebody, right, whatever, right, be able to go to them and say, I'm struggling with this. They understand everything that is me going into it, and can provide perspective that, while yes, it would be super awesome to have Christ tell me exactly what I need to do and be like out of the Gospels, I don't have that, right? So in the same way that, putting out the fleece, you're trying to interpret a direction that you're going, it is still dependent on me interpreting it, and I am flawed. So in my mind, having a mentor is, I try to find, like, I have mentors that I consider peers, right? Like people that I look up to and I look for advice. I also have mentors who are older than me, specifically because they've gone through phases of life, right? Like my wife and I talk frequently to parents of kids who are now in their late teens, early 20s, because our boys are about to enter teenage years, asking them for advice on what did or what didn't work. And likewise, we try to mentor young married couples that are coming up and meet with them, because we're coming up on being married for 15 years now, right? Which is a little bonkers to think that it's been 15 years. But to provide experience and perspective, right? Because the whole idea behind mentorship, in my mind, is helping somebody to learn from the mistakes that I made in a very, not super structured, but in a very direct way. Because we all share when, at an exhortation or a Bible class, or you're having spiritual discussions and you're like, I struggled with this is how I got through it, maybe this will help you. But it's more focused and it builds that connection. And so then when we're meeting with some of the young married couples that we mentor with, one of the things we talk about is we go through a bunch of different exercises to help them build a toolbox of skills and resources that they can go to. Because when things are going well, it's easy to build those, but you don't want to be trying to build or figure out how to solve something when you're in the middle of a valley, right? To kind of play on the name of what we're doing here, right? So the idea is when I am at my lowest, I already have a relationship with you or with Levi or with an older brother or sister that I can go to, and I don't have to like say, okay, let me give you my entire life story like I'm starting with a new therapist or something, right? You already know everything. So I need help to get me out of this specific valley, and I only have to give you a little bit of detail. So that's part of why we've been encouraging it, and also restating it to younger people, right? Being the mentor instead of the mentee is also super encouraging because it forces you to have that retrospection on your life, and you realize, look at all the valleys that I came out of, right? Like it allows you to have that sort of that perspective, which we may not always do on our own. So that's kind of my pitch for doing mentorship.
Fantastic. I think those are exactly all the advantages, and I think everyone can strive to be and also to have a mentor in their life. Is there any like palpable, easy advice tip for someone who's like, oh, I wish I had one, and how do I approach the topic? Like, is there one easy tip you can share with people?
I'd say that the simplest one for me is just ask. Like, think about part of for me, and I say just ask, but it's also be deliberate about the asking, right? So, and to Levi's point about how you sometimes will have different mentors over the course of your life. Don't try to put all the pressure on like, I'm going to go ask Chris to be my mentor for the rest of my life. Like that is an insane amount of pressure to put on any one person. And we're all human. We're all going to mess up. Someone who you think is the most amazing example in your life that you look up to and think, I want to be just like so-and-so. In 2 years, they may have a crisis of faith and suddenly they need you. And if you've built everything into being reliant on one person. So the one thing is ask and look for someone who you connect with, right? But also don't just stop at one. You should have a village. One of my favorite passages that you were earlier when you were asking about it is Psalm 125. And the reason for that is it talks about, we are like the hills. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it memorized, right? But as the hills surround Mount Zion, so the Lord surrounds us. And I like the visualization of a range of mountains because we're not all by ourselves. We're all connected to each other. And so my goal is to have as many people as I can maintain connections with to be supporting me, because I don't know who I'm going to be able to support or who I'm going to need to support me. So being open and honest with people and saying like, hey, can we get coffee? And I just want to kind of, I want to be able to have a conversation with you. So I'd say like, you don't have to put a lot of like pressure or make it like this big formal thing, right? Just be like, hey, I just want to talk about life. I just want to be able to talk to you and be real with you, right? And if it helps to set expectations to say, hey, I'm looking for someone to help mentor me, go for it. Like, I don't think there's anything there, but you also have to be respectful. If I go to someone and say, hey, can I mentor me? And they're like, you know what? I'm in a really bad place in my life. I can't do it. You also have to be respectful of that too, right? So it's got to be a mutual thing, but I'd say just ask for it. Like I have mentors who think very much like I do. And sometimes that's valuable because they can empathize with me. But I also have mentors who do not think like me at all. And that can be good and bad because sometimes we're like, well, why do you struggle with that? I'm like, I don't know. I just do. And they're like, just stop. And I'm like, it's not as easy as that, right? For some people, it's just not easy, right? So having mentors that think like you and don't, like that's why I say, and why I think when Levi was talking about having multiple mentors and people that you look at, it's super valuable because you don't want to put anyone on a pedestal to be your sole source or your sole sounding board, because we need multiple perspectives. So that would be my kind of advice of what to look for and how to do it. It's like, one, just ask. And two, it would be like, right, ask lots of people.
Yeah. So good. So many gems in that one. Thanks so much. Levi, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I'm gonna do a plug that WCF actually has a program for mentorship. So on their website, one of their programs that they run is trying to match mentors and mentees. So there is WCF is trying to do that. As far as how you find them, otherwise, I think it is just I mean, I don't know. I notice it even when we're at meeting or you're at a camp or a gathering. Be intentional with who you want to get closer to, and go up and talk to them, like Chris is saying. I mean, just ask. I think as soon as you can be vulnerable, it's pretty easy to get vulnerability in return. And I guess I don't want to sound down on the concept. I would say it just in my personal journey, I'm at a place where I really do am needing to focus on kind of self-validation, and I think maybe that's what I would caution about mentorship, is that sometimes we can be looking just for approval from those people, and that would be a problem. But I do think it's so helpful to have a mentors as a resource. And yeah, I do think I'll echo what Chris already said. I don't think your mentor particularly needs to be older. You can have someone who's the same age as you or even younger that you admire, and you just ask more about how they're going through this journey.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic, both of you. I am wary of the time. So let's close out this session, and maybe you can just share your wishes, your advice you'd like to give to anyone who's struggling, who's going through a hard time. Just your last words on this podcast, and just to share what you'd say to anyone who's going through that time. Yeah. Start with Chris, maybe.
Sure. I'd probably say my kind of parting words is, no matter how deep or dark the valley might be, you will come out the other side, and don't suffer alone. You might feel alone. You might feel like you're the only one facing that struggle, but I can promise you other people have struggled with the same thing or worse things, and it might not feel like it when you're in the moment, but look for that, and don't be afraid to reach out. There's no shame in struggling. Every single person that has ever been born on this world outside of Christ has messed up. Some of them epically so. It's okay. We all struggle. We all come, and everyone comes through it, right? Everyone comes through it at the other side. It's just a matter of how we handle the struggle. So I'd say don't worry about feeling alone, and reach out.
So much.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from that. I think everything Chris said was really good there. Just the only thing I would add is like you said, that you're going to get through it. You're going to get through that struggle. I would break it all the way down to just taking one step, making one good decision. That's really all. You're not going to solve your life. You feel like right now everything's collapsing all around you. You're not going to solve everything with one decision. Just make one good decision and then stack those, and keep stacking them. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. Yeah, it's really been an honor for me to interview you, to hear this wisdom of you both who've been through a lot more, not a lot, but more life than I have so far. And it's been fantastic to hear. Obviously, I will link, what was episode 300, I think? Was that the right one?
Yeah. I think it's at 200 and 300. So 200, I think Levi mentioned, is the one where we give probably the most comprehensive backstory of how the podcast got started, if anybody's interested. Yeah. And then there's a special episode 300 where we talk about that specific one where I talk about the chaos, I think, that happened while we were trying to record this.
Fair enough. Totally. I will put them in the links. And I want to just thank you both again. God bless for you and your families. And may we see each other soon. So hopefully in the kingdom. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate it.